Alright, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. We've got some updates to the Tevesh Szat Rograkh deck, the Bull Szat deck. And some of these updates are the direct result of suggestions made in the previous video. And you can see here I've gone through and I've read all of the videos. For some reason, there's something weird about YouTube. If I actually click like on this, it unlikes it, even though it's not colored in. I don't know why it fills in here and doesn't here, but regardless, yeah, I've gone through and looked at many of the suggestions, and in addition to looking at those suggestions, in some cases just somebody pointed out just a superior card doing the exact same thing that I was doing in the card slot. But in addition to checking out those suggestions, I've also played a lot of games, and since the 11th, what you'll see here is, so we're running through on the 11th, on the 12th, played quite a few games here, had a series of wins, and then started running into 5-color Bad Stuff, who's always a strong opponent, and knows the list as well, because he's a fan of the channel, which provides additional challenge. But that makes a perfect playtesting partner. Someone strong who's going to bring a good deck and knows enough about what your deck's trying to do to really put the screws on you in the right way. If possible. And so in the course of playing those games, you can see I had a win, and then 3 losses, and then 4 wins, 2 losses, a couple more wins, a win, a loss, a win. So in the course of playing those games, and then later Colossum, who I don't know if he's someone who watches the channel, but is an opponent that's on Magic Online that plays cEDH and has multiple decks, just like 5-color Bad Stuff does. And we'll throw some really good challenge at you if you ever get a chance to play them. I had a few losses on the 13th as well, some wins. Like, against both of these opponents, I did win more than I lost, but I lost more than I like. So the question was, what was underperforming? What could be better? What are they exploiting? Sometimes you don't do as well because they play a threat that you can't deal with. Sometimes you don't do as well because they play disruption and it throws you, like it prevents you from playing. So, in the first example, the first case might be somebody resolves like Oath of Druids against you, and you are playing a creature deck, or you have a creature and you have no way to deal with it, the Oath, and you can't get your creatures off the board because they're using like the land that forces you to have creatures. And in a scenario like that where you can't deal with the Oath, sometimes you can be in big trouble. Another example would be of the other problem, the disruption problem, of course, is exactly what this deck does. You're getting hemmed, you're getting wastelanded, and so forth, and it's like, how robust is your deck in the face of disruption, and how many threats are there out there that can potentially just win a game against you that you haven't prepared for, or that you don't have an answer to. So how weak are you to hosers, or just powerful threats like Oath? And over the course of playing, I felt there were some cards that were underperforming. I looked through all the comments on the video, and I did find various suggestions here. You can see people are having good conversation back and forth, which I appreciated. There was a little bit of, I think people were getting a little friction with each other on the channel, which I definitely prefer if you guys do your best to keep it respectful. I mean, we're all in the same, we're all trying to design, so it's good to have a debate, but make sure to cut the debate off when you realize you're trying to force the opponent to agree with you, rather than explaining your point and then let them agree or not. You gotta let them not agree. But anyway, eventually it looked like folks cut it off. I didn't have to jump in and say anything to anybody, but I do like the back and forth, and I do think it's healthy for us to be having these conversations, and it makes the end result is that the previous build of the deck, and I'll kind of bring that up. So this is the older version. We had the Abyss in here, had a strong back and forth with a friend of mine about the Abyss and whether or not it belonged. We had a Bombardment in here. There was a few other cards that were in here. There was a Sulphurous Mire in here, and some other things. So anyway, let's get to the changes though. Let's talk about what's in now. So what's changed is that the build is now here, and the build feels a lot more focused on what it wants to do, a lot more resilient in the face of disruption, and a little bit better at potentially winning games that you you might actually have lost, but you can find like ways to win in creative fashion. For example, sometimes maybe you can't solve a particular problem, but you can just kind of beat the opponent down with gigantic Karn and versus Saga tokens, for example, and just pull a win out that way. But at any rate, so a couple of the cards that are in here that are interesting and different. So we took the Abyss out. With the Abyss out, it made certain cards a little bit better, and I was on the hunt for life gain. Unfortunately, Breya has Breya, and it also has Jitte, has really good life gain, and this deck did not. In fact, it didn't have any life gain, and you don't necessarily need life gain in a 40 life format, but it is nice to have, especially when you're playing cards like Ad Nauseam. When you're playing Necro, you've got Ancient Tomb, you've got Crypt. There's a lot of ways that this deck deals damage to itself, Thoughtseizes, and so forth. Playing a Shatterskull, smashing untapped takes 3 of your life, and on and on and on. Deathcloud. So like, you do a boatload of damage to yourself. So with no help from your opponent, you can easily strip your life down to like single digits at times. So the solution was having some life gain, but I just could not find life gain that I was happy with until I realized a couple of things. Ran it past Brian and some of the other guys, and it seems to be working out very well. I had multiple people testing this, and we'll get into some games here in just a moment. But one of the most important cards that I added that gives you life potentially, but also is just fantastic in this deck, was this card that I'd never even seen before, and found as a result of hunting for life gain cards, which is Sorin the Mirthless. So Sorin, as a 4-mana enchantment, 4-mana planeswalker, is a +1. He lets you Dark Confidant the top card of your library, and if you don't want to, you look at it. If you don't want a Dark Confidant in your hand, you don't have to. So if like the card would kill you, you just +1 him and don't take the card. But any other point in the game, it's just more cards that you can put in your hand. It isn't draw, it's put into your hand, which means it bypasses things like Narset. And then Sorin's other abilities are, what you see here. -2, so it's 4 loyalty to start, so it goes straight to 5 if you start drawing right away. At -2, you can create a 2/3 black vampire with flying and lifelink. And believe it or not, sometimes just gaining 2 life per turn is enough. If you think about it in terms of necropotence, it means you're drawing 2 cards per turn, so we'll look at life that way. But also allows you to pressure other planeswalkers and just kind of be a pain. It gives you a blocker for things that, you can chump block if you need to. You can just throw them down and protect your planeswalker. You can make a vampire and just eat it and draw cards with Tevesh Szat, although that is basically generally foolish because you just rather +1 in that case and just take a card with Sorin and make 2 0/1 dorks with Tevesh Szat in that circumstance. Almost always, right? And then for -7, Sorin's ability, which has never come up yet, but it's nice to have, is you get to do a 13-point drain life to any target. So you can just point and boom, your opponent for 13, gain 13 life. You can do the same to a planeswalker. You can do the same to a creature. Any target is any target. And a 13-point drain life that you can play. So you play this guy, you plus him to 5 loyalty, and then 6, 7, boom. Not that bad, pretty good. And in the event that you need to use it, having that available is pretty strong, especially when, as I said, the deck's running, Necropotence and Ad Nauseam, so that can convert over really well. And then there was one other life gain card that seemed really good for this deck once the Abyss was gone, which was Batterskull, believe it or not. So it's obviously a card you typically don't see without Stoneforge in the deck, and you typically don't see Batterskull at all, frankly, very often. But in this deck, it's very interesting. It's sort of a moat. It acts a little bit like a moat, in that majority of creatures that you're going to allow to live, because you're going to save your removal for critical things, but the majority of creatures that you're going to allow to live are basically bricked by this card, right? They can't swing into it. They can't really outrace you with damage when this card is going, and it's very hard it's hard for opponents to deal with because they have to target it twice, and they have to do that while you're attacking their hand and their mana, which is frustrating at any time unless you don't have 3 mana untapped. You can cheat it out with Workshop, which is always good, or any of the big old rituals like I mean, it's a perfectly valid play to just play this thing early in a game and just start, whacking away with it. Um, but also, in a weird way, it has haste. If you have enough mana anyway, you can have like a Tevesh Szat counter or whatever, or a Sorin token, or a Rog, something like that, and you can throw this thing down, and then you can just equip it. If you have the mana to do it, typically that means you're going to have a workshop shaving some of the mana off the cost. But yeah, you can, and I have actually done that. I've just thrown the batter scroll into play, equipped it immediately, attacked and killed the planeswalker, and gained life in the process. In a game that was a bit of a slog, completely bricking my opponent's offense and killing their planeswalker, and to do with just this card batter skull, because I happen to have a creature in play just laying around, perfect for it. So in this deck, it actually works very, very well. I mean, there's a chance it won't stay. But the other thing that's neat about it is, besides being a creature that you can use to attack planeswalkers, it's a creature that you can, like, if you play Batterskull, typically if you play a creature and then later on you Deathcloud, I mean, let's be real, most of the time you Deathcloud, you win the game. But in the event that you don't win the game when you cloud, maybe it's like a value cloud where you're like clouding for enough to kill their lands just to buy time because their commander's so scary, knowing that it's not, knowing it's a little bit of a desperation play, hoping you'll replay it on Underworld Breach or the Yawgmoth's Will down the road, but you kind of have to do it in a situation like that where it doesn't just win the game. The Batterskull token dies, but the Batterskull does not, which means that actually these cards are actually synergistic with each other, because the main because of the fact that the card can take a hit like that and still be perfectly fine to do what you needed to do later on in the game, which is pretty great. And of course, you can occasionally just play a Batterskull, have it just like sitting in play or whatever, and then at some point you make some gigantic robot and you equip it and you attack and just gain a ton of life, and your robot has vigilance, which means that you've now got this huge thing that's protecting your board, protecting all of your planeswalkers, of which we now have more. So for all those reasons, it's pretty awesome in this deck, surprisingly. And I don't recall, I don't believe that Karn was in the deck. No, Karn was in the deck. I'm trying to think of what other changes may have occurred. I don't think there was any change at 3. I think at 2, I dropped the Bombardment, and I really like the Bombardment, to be honest. But unfortunately, just felt I had to drop it and added a card that was suggested because this card is just too good not to play. I realized after some thought and after some testing, and that card is Gamble. Gamble is a card I don't like at all. Kind of goes against everything that I try to do when I build a deck. I don't like random. I don't like card disadvantage, and I definitely don't like a card that combines both in some of the worst ways. And sometimes, like, if you top deck this card and you have no cards in hand, you literally drew nothing for the turn. It's not even like top decking an Imperial Seal where you drew nothing, but your next turn will be good. You just drew nothing, right? But the fact of the matter is that just doesn't happen that often in this deck. And in the event that you gamble, like, let's say going first, you have a very slow start, and you have any red source, and you cast Gamble. If you gamble for Jeweled Lotus, which would probably be the target, and at that point in the game, like, say you're going first, you have 7 cards, you play land, you have 6 cards, you play Gamble, you have 5 cards, there's a 20% chance that you just discarded a card for nothing. But that means there's an 80% chance you probably win the game on turn 2. So would you play a card that was 1 red and said there's an 80% chance that you win the game? That's kind of the argument for why Gamble fits into this deck. It's just one of those cards that is made at a time when power levels were really imbalanced. And the thing about Gamble really is that Gamble is a card that's one of the drawbacks, the discard effect, is somewhat mitigated by the fact that, so normally if you have, let's say you go first turn, Badlands, Gamble, and you're holding Necropotence, you just gamble for Dark Ritual, right? Well, you now have Dark Ritual and Necropotence in your hand, so there's 2 cards that Gamble can make you discard. And so there's kind of like 2 bad outcomes there. But if you're gambling for Jeweled Lotus, it's Lotus or nothing, because you're holding your commander holding right in the command zone. And once again, it's just one of those cards that abuses the command zone, which is generally speaking a good thing to do in this format. So I mean, it's what I don't like about the format, but if you can't beat them, join them, right? And while we could beat them sometimes, we're not generally speaking beating this deck. And Gamble just adds to the madness of it. Also, of course, Gamble can fuel a later on. Like if you do fail, let's say you gamble and you lose the Lotus or whatever. At some point later in the game, you can always breach or will, and then hey, you've got some extra mana in the graveyard. It's not like a deal breaker. It's not. It isn't like you just lose the game on the spot, but you very well might win. So that's why it's set up that way. Anyhow, that's enough on these. There were, like I said, lots of good suggestions in here. Some people. One other thing, I guess, I didn't have Smoldering. I don't think I had Smoldering Marsh in here. I can't remember what I had. I think I had the Cycling Land or the Snow Land. Somebody said, "Hey, why are you not using this?" You know, I think I had the Snow Land, and they were like, "Why don't you use the Cycle Land?" I was like, "Oh yeah, duh, that's a strict upgrade." So I put the Cycling Land in, the blue black, the black red, come into play tapped, Swamp Mountain that cycles for 2. So yeah, that's a strict upgrade. So I played that, and then I realized Smoldering Marsh is actually an upgrade for this deck. The reasoning is that we play actually 5 basic lands. I actually took out Dragon Skull Summit, put in an extra swamp. This is mostly a mono black deck. Put in the extra swamp, and we actually play like quite a few basic lands, and we're happy to go get them. And so that means that Smoldering Marsh has a chance of coming into play. This would be Dragon Skull Summit if we didn't need, I felt, an extra target for our fetches, which I think we do. And we have 7 fetch effects and exactly 7 targets at the moment. 7 mountain fetchers and exactly. Is it mountain or swamp? Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm totally drawing a blank right now. I'm pretty sure what it breaks down to is that we end up in a situation here where the number of fetches that we have is something like 7 swamps and 7 black targets, and something like if we look at the red sources, it's less, and we could end up in a situation where there's no where you have something like a Wooded Foothills and no target. So I felt like we need just like one more mountain, and it could be basic mountain, but this is a better fit for the deck, I think. And you do sometimes have windows where you just go get this thing, and that's totally fine. And other times, you can just get your basics and you can play it. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Basically, this is such a tempo deck that having cycling on a land is not as valuable as actually potentially having a land come into play untapped. And because lands coming into play untapped is so valuable, Dragon Skull Summit slightly better than this. Because it can come into play untapped on turn 2. This cannot, not until turn 3. But, like I said, I think having an extra fetchable target is more important than Dragon Skull Summit. And then Summit ends up getting cut because we don't want 2 lands that come into play tapped. 1 is enough. We'd really prefer 0. So that's kind of where we're at with the build and the change to the mana base. All right, let's get into some games. So the updated list was played on the 14th. So as you can see, I had a win. I had a loss against Colossum, another one, but a number of wins actually. So it's like 4-2, and then a string of wins since. Of course, I haven't played 5-color bad stuff yet. I'm sure you can come in and beat up on my win rate. But in the meantime, let's run through 6-14, and we'll just check out all the games. Some of these games, unfortunately, opponents, well, they die on basically turn 1, or they concede on turn 1 or turn 2. But that is what you're getting into if you're playing this deck. You're getting into games where you're going to be like really excited because you do some crazy stuff with your hand, and your opponent's going to be super unenthusiastic about it, I guess, and won't let you play. So it's just something to live with. By the way, another cut in the deck recently was before I start, was the red and black. I believe I was running, I guess it was cut already. The single target card here that didn't make the cut the red-black card that destroys target planeswalker artifact. If you think you need more planeswalker removal, you could potentially add it, but I think the deck's in a good place right now. Essentially, Batterskull is our other planeswalker removal because of the other things that we needed to do. So, alright, let's get into it. Oh, yeah, I'm playing like I'm actually playing and versus the replay. Alright, so my opponent... Oh, well... This is a very good hand, right? It's not an insane hand or anything, but it's very good. So it's exciting. So I go ahead and just play this right here. The only reason I played it is because I'm playing against blue-white, and I don't really want this to get spell-pierced. So I figured it would make more sense. Plus, my opponent mulliganed quite a bit, and the best way for my opponent to recover from this would be something like an early Time Twister, so I just felt I would get the Mox out of my hand rather than hide the surprise. Alright, so turn 2, going to play Shatterskull, going to play Rograkh. This is a weird one because I really want to Inquisition, but I also want to sit on Opposition Agent. So I just play Rograkh here to make my opponent think that I might have the deflection. Maybe they don't think about it that hard. Doesn't matter too much. Maybe they decide they want to use removal on it with so few cards in hand. I'm certainly happy if they do that. If my opponent, like for example, countered right there somehow, like counter target spell that your opponent paid no mana for or whatever, that wouldn't even make sense, right? Nobody would do that, so forget I said anything. But yeah, I see very little drawback to actually playing Rograkh against specifically these color decks here, where there's not going to be a lot of like AoE splash damage and such happening. So I'm tempted to flash out the agent here, but then again, I might be feeding the agent right into a mana drain or something, and I really don't have a follow-up if I don't draw a land or an artifact mana. So I decided to do nothing. I guess I had to play Rogue to turn on the Amber. I guess that was the reasoning there. I just realized. And now that I've top decked the Mana Vault, though, I feel good. I can play the Workshop, play the Mana Vault, see if my opponent, drains it or whatever. If they do, that's fine. I'll just Inquisition whatever their follow-up is out of their hand. The problem I'm running into here is just that I want to leave black on tap for Opposition Agent, but I don't have 2 black, right? So I really would like to play my Commander here. I'd like to Inquisition Commander or play Opposition Agent, but I can't do any of that. I can't do 2 of those effects because I'm missing a black. So the game plan here is we'll just sit on the Opposition Agent, hope that I can flash it out and draw my opponent into maybe countering or something along those lines, and then punish him with the follow-up of the Commander. Of course, my opponent just plays, doesn't play a fetch land, plays Geist of St. Traff, and of course Opposition Agent here. Still, I've got a window, let's play it, it's good, and it can block Geist, which is nice. I get a Sorin here and a Rakdos Signet, which is just lovely, right? So I'm going to play the Signet. Now we've got some mana. Let's see if I can get my opponent to sacrifice that Geist. And if they do, then they probably don't have... probably cannot deal with the Commander. So I go ahead and run the Commander out, thinking that's a sign that it's safe. And my intent here is to draw 3 and then hopefully hit a Swamp or a Black Source and then play Inquisition. So we're going to go for that. And I do. Very nice. So we'll go get basic Swamp and Inquisition my opponent. My opponent concedes, of course, with only 4 cards in hand at this point because they mulligan themselves a little too hard. So just a fine game there. You notice I could have gone and got Badlands, but I've got multiple red sources here. You want to get Swamps with this deck when you can, basic Swamps, when you feel that you can afford to. You want to have at least 2 to 3 red sources, ideally, just because there's double red cards and people can disrupt that. But here I've got 3 red sources, so it's definitely a go get a Swamp turn there. And all right, so that was game 1 against Hemp Knights, and then we moved into some games against Colossums. Now you'll see a few losses here. You can see what that looks like. So in this game, my opponent's playing Galazat Prismari. This is a very frustrating commander. You can see I had a test card in here. I still have Jessica in here. I've cut both of these cards. So this is one of those games that was instructive to me. So I Moon Silver Key, tutor with it, go get Soul Ring, or Crypt rather, and my opponent forced a will. Insane levels of discipline to not force like the Vault or the Key, but yeah, brutal for me. And that actually ends up being the game. That was the entire game. That's it. Death by force of will. So, oops. So I said the deck never lost to a deck with islands in it. You can scratch that. It actually has lost a few times to islands, but it's very rare, and it typically would look something like that. That's where I was thinking. I kind of really would like a little less, a little less all in. I like that key. Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting card. It probably belongs in many commander decks that it's currently not in. It's a 2-mana artifact, and for 1 mana you can sack it to go get a basic land or a mana producing artifact. So you can go get it's basically Fabricate that's colorless. Anyone can use, and it's funny that it's not in this deck because it's actually crazy good for this deck, I think. But Fabricate might be a little bit too slow for this deck, and because we have this temp mana, like you saw there, where I invested temporary mana to try to get permanent mana. If you don't end up, like if they kill the mana or they force a will it or whatever, you can definitely get yourself in a bind with that card. So anyway, I would run it if I felt that there was a slot for it, but it's definitely one of those cards that I'm just not quite sure there's really time. 3 mana to go get 3 mana to go get Mana Crypt or Mana Vault or Soul Ring is incredible in Brea, but I just don't know that this deck is, for want of a better word, slow enough to even be willing to spend 3 mana on a Soul Ring. Anyway, so this is game 2, and my hand is quite a bit better, just because it's a little more robust. I do have to get a Badlands here, that's fine. I go ahead and play Rograkh first. I've got Swat and Rograkh up, which is just fantastic. Hopefully not getting strip mined here, right? When it plays Unholy Heat. Can't swat that. But, I mean, when your opponent uses their turn to kill your 0-drop, you're pretty happy, to be quite honest. I'm going to go ahead and just play it again. Sit on the swat again. Maybe I can get my opponent to use more removal on my 0-drop, right? Instead, runs out a Soul Ring and a Thieving Skydiver. Brutal. But I have a little trick here. I get to Deflecting Swat. I had to read it and make sure it works. It does. And I tell him, how about if you gain control of your Soul Ring? And of course he does, which means I get to keep my Mana Vault untapped. And top deck a red source. It's like, mwah, perfect, right? Because now we get to go Mox Amber, Tevesh Szat, tap for red, sack, and shatter that Soul Ring. And now we're sitting pretty good. Would have liked to have hit a land, of course, but you know, can't have it all sometimes. Alright, so Revoker comes down, obviously naming Tevesh Szat. And my opponent swings in and smacks it as well. Smart play on my opponent, not assuming that the Revoker's going to do enough. That is correct to make that assumption. Alright, so I'm going to try for a Rograkh first. It sticks. Beautiful. So with that, we'll go ahead and play. I'm thinking about it, and I finally decide, you know what? Let's play the monkey. So I play Hasted Ragavan and get in there, and look at this hit. I get a static orb that I don't have to deal with, and a treasure token. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and make some guys, and I am going to play a Dark Confidant. So not killer turn, but not bad, right? Not bad, and a good use of my mana. Opponents, for his turn, plays War of Invention on 1, which I was thinking, well, the Soul Ring's gone, so why don't you just play it on 0, right? Pithing Needle, naming Tevesh Szat, and then wisely attacks it as well. Alright, so Confidant finally gets me some lands to play this game with, and a Thoughtseize. Very nice. Alright, so for my turn, I'm going to Ragavan and dash in and hit. And Ragavan finds Mana Crypt. It's so gross. Ragavan is just a ridiculous card in a format as broken as this one because your hits are just so delish, right? Alright, so we'll go ahead and get the Crypt down, play a land. Let's seize my opponent. Urza and a Mystic Confluence. So we know. Alright, so better to the devil we know, I guess. We know the Confluence is there. We'll just kind of leave that up as a reminder not to walk into Mystic Confluence. Alright, so for my turn, going to play Karn. Reveal 2 cards and ask my opponent, which card can I have, Vandal Blast or Gilded Lotus? And my opponent decides I should have a Gilded Lotus. So we've got a Vandal Blast floating under Karn over here. And Ragavan sneaks back into my hand. So I didn't get to use my commander that turn. For my opponent's turn, top decks the Chandra. Remember, they have a Confluence and only 1 card in hand. Yuck. Chandra allows my opponent to exile a card, but the card they exile is Mana Drain, so not great. Just dings me for 2 and loses one of his best cards. Decides not to attack with a Skydiver because I guess wants to protect Chandra here. It's an interesting choice, but I mean, they've got Tevesh, Szat pinned, and Karn is pretty hard to kill with a Skydiver, so I can understand it. Alright, so I hit Wooded Foothills, so we'll take that out of the revealed pile. Do some life loss here. You see what I mean about how much this deck hurts itself. Alright, so we'll get the Grim down. Opponent's tapped out, so it's a really good time to run out of Lotus. So we'll play that. And then grab Vandal Blast. And go ahead and play Wooded Foothills. Destroy the Pithing Needle, allowing me to draw some cards off Tevesh. Find a land and Fiery Confluence. I'm going to go ahead and search here and then play Ragavan. And then use my Dust Bowl. My opponent is sitting on a 5-drop. I know that's the card in my opponent's hand, so let's get him down to where if they want to Chandra into Mystic Confluence, that's fine. But otherwise, they can't really, they're not going to be able to use this to counter anything unless they can find some, like an Ancient Tomb or something. And even then, I could just Dust Bowl it before casting. So, all right, opponent does choose to add some mana, but uses it to play their Galazath, which gives them a treasure. This thing is nuts. This is a flying Urza that creates a treasure instead of a robot. It's better than Urza, and it's better as a commander, and it's super sick, obviously, with Winter Orb, so now you have a Winter Orb deck that can run both of these cards. This is incredibly gross. That's why the Static Orb was good to see go away. This is a very hard commander to deal with, and like I said, very, very gross. Now, my opponent had missed an attack last turn, so remember a turn earlier, they chose not to attack. So Tevesh is actually in play rather than dead here, so it ends up actually biting my opponent a bit. Alright, so we'll lose some life to Coalition Relic. Opponent has 1 unknown card and the Mystic Confluence. Alright, so we might want to do some testing here. We're going to first draw some cards. Okay, Underworld Breach, gross. Alright, so now it's just a question of how to play this turn, how to sequence this turn correctly, basically. So go ahead and play a Snow-Covered Swamp. And I decide that what I want to do is... Uh-oh, are we breaking? I think we're breaking. So I believe something went wrong. I'm pretty sure I did not draw Underworld Breach here. I'm pretty sure I drew like a discard effect or whatever. Because what I ended up doing this turn was, what I actually did was I Diabolic Intented. This last turn did not play out this way. I Diabolic Intent for a Death Cloud. And Death Clouded my opponent to having just the Chandra and the token. And they make a gigantic construct. And I don't remember what else is going on here, but I do know that at the end of this turn, my opponent had no cards in hand, no creatures, no lands, just a token and a Chandra. And then from there, I have this gigantic construct. They're going to one-shot it. And he draws and like pluses it or something, doesn't find anything, hits me for a couple points of damage, and then on the next turn, of course, I have nothing but just the construct and the mana and some cards in hand. And then on the next turn, of course, I make another construct and puke out some more creatures and smash the Chandra, and then it gives up, or maybe it just gives up after the cloud. I remember specifically that was a Death Cloud turn. So we'll move on to the next game. All right, so game 3 against Colosseum. Not sure. We'll have to check his deck list because I think he will sometimes just. Yeah, so still on the Galazath. And have a very, annoying Dragon Skull. But here it'll be okay because we've got the Vista. In this case, it works out fine. At any rate, I have a pretty good hand for dealing with, for disrupting my opponent. And the first thing I want to do is take away 2 mana from my opponent here. So, opponent has locked down Tevesh Szat. We can get around to that, hopefully in multiple ways. But let's kill my opponent's Soul Ring before we proceed. Opponent attacks with Revoker, searches for Steam Vents and passes. Let's see if I can smoke the Revoker, I think. Or I decide not to because it's not a... Oh yeah, I leave it alone. It's not a threat right now, and it is a target for Rack and Ruin, so just let my opponent have the Revoker is my thinking here, and then... Okay, and then I make a huge error. I'm just like on autopilot, I guess, and I don't fetch in response to Vista, and if you look, literally 0 cards in my deck, in my hand, sorry, have activated abilities other than Dust Bowl and Vista. And I don't sack in response to the Vista. So my opponent names Prismatic Vista in response to the Spyglass, rather. And this thing, ironically, I would have played this last turn if it had been the Smoldering. And then, of course, this play here would have said Vista, and then I would have had this untapped and just popped it. But this is actually going to hurt me quite a bit for a while. I do get a Soul Ring here, but it's very risky. So I decide, let's see if I can Vandal Blast safely. And opponent does counter it. I'm so glad to see Archmage's Charm be the counter of choice because that was bait for a Soul Ring. Opponent still has missed their commander though. The early removal definitely helped. They're down to only 2 cards in hand. They have now played a 3rd target for me. I tried to rest, which is just gorgeous. But I still can't play like multiple things. I could try to Jessica's Will just for 2 red, which would potentially allow me to do, and then maybe like hit something that I can do over here. I could try the Rack and Ruin and then duress after. I could try to Mind Twist for 2. There's a lot of plays I can make. I can also Dust Bowl my opponent and sack the Vista, and then just say to hell with the Spyglass, right? Like, sure, you got a Spyglass naming Vista, I'll just sack it. I'll just turn it into a Strip Mine and ignore it. So I'm kind of like struggling here on what to do, wishing I had exactly 1 more mana, but I decide to pass there and wait, because there's a good chance if my opponent hits their 4-drop, they're going to cast their commander, and then in response I can Rack and Ruin and kill 2 problems. Because they do have 4 mana here. So that's what happens. My opponent goes for it, and then in response I can remove 2 problems there, leaving my opponent with just a port and a treasure token. And my opponent cannot even port the Vista. Alright, so I'm going to play Rograkh here. Going to attempt to run out a Jessica's Will before I duress, of course. And I see Azure Signet, Guild Lotus, Liliana. Not the greatest, but I do have some mana floating. And the Signet will turn on Opal, so let's try it. Signet sticks. Alright, let's try fetching. Fetch sticks. Okay, let's duress. Opponent, in response, plays Memory Lapse. Okay, well, I've got a Mox Opal now, and there's a Liliana hiding on top, so hey, awesome. It looked like I wasn't going to have any chance in hell of playing that Liliana, but no, totally fine here. Alright, so let's get rid of that for now. And I'm going to lose my Lotus, but, you know, not a bad turn at all for me. Opponent plays Narset, and then Narsets into an absolute brick. Somehow manages to miss completely, which is very unlucky, obviously. Leaving my opponent with just 1 card in hand and a Narset. Now, Rograkh here basically it was doing nothing here, except, remember, I do have Batterskull, so it's possible I could 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 play Batterskull and then equip and attack and kill this. I need 1 more mana to do it, and that's it though. I mean, that's generally speaking not a hard. That's not a hard ask, right? There's the duress that got lapsed, so let's see if we can just save my mana and plus up Liliana instead. And that way, if the last card in their hand's a land, I don't miss. It's a Memory Deluge, but hey, glad to see it go. Perfect. With that window, I'm just going to slam a Necro into play. And then I'm going to Necro for a bunch. And I like what's going on over here, so given that I feel pretty good about my board state, I'll go ahead and attack my opponent's mana here. Take out one of his lands. leaving the port, since the port is pretty weak against Dust Bowl. And so for my opponent's turn, they draw and then Narset into Karn. So he's got draw into more draw, unfortunately. Alright, so opponent is able to Karn, and I have to choose between giving him an island or Shatter Skull Smashing. And I choose to give my opponent Shatter Skull Smashing, strangely enough. And the reason I do it is because if I kill the this Volcanic Island, then in order for him to play Smashing, I'll have to use a token plus have a red source, which is kind of a big ask, but also I've got a Thoughtseize, so I actually gave them a land, but I can actually duress, I can Thoughtseize the land out of their hand and continue to attack my opponent's red mana sources, unless my opponent plays it. I was thinking he might hold it for, killing Liliana. So if my opponent held it, then I get to Thoughtseize this out of their hand, Shatter Skull Smashing, the flip side, and then Liliana the other card. But no luck there. Alright, so I'm going to plus up here. I don't need the Thoughtseize in this case. I get a Winter Orb. Having a Braid, which is really nice. We'll see how this works out for me. I'm still holding the Mind Twist just in case my opponent draws away to restore their hand. Makes more sense than holding on to like the Thoughtseizes and stuff. So, alright, so let's get the old Volcanic Island there off the board. And while we're at it, let's take that Torque off the board as well, and just necro a few more cards into hand. And you've seen this before in the deck. We pressure the opponent's mana sources. We attack their hand, and even though the opponent's kind of winning, they're every turn that this goes on, they're actually losing, right? So, all right. Anyhow, opponent decides to Karn, and this time reveals Jace and Ponder, and I put Jace in the Karn zone, so my opponent is going to get to Ponder here, with the hope that I can make that Jace unplayable very soon. So opponent does Ponder, and then plays Pithing Needle, and once again, because I don't know what was wrong with me, I literally don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't necro in response to the Needle. Horrible. So now I have to win the game with just this stuff, unless I can kill the Needle. I have to make sure that Needle dies, though, or this is it. And the problem here is, you go, oh, you got Rampage. Well, if I Rampage, I can't, they'll just sack the token, right? So unless they use the token, which would be doing me a favor. Or what I can do is I can play my Commander and use my Commander to draw, sort of, because Narset's kind of suppressing that. So a little tricky here. Alright, so first we're going to plus and get the last card out of their hand. Looks like I'm not going to need Deluge, so I just throw it away. Opponent loses a Spell Pierce. Very nice. Alright. So let's see what we can do. So first I'm going to make him sack a Planeswalker. Let's see, which card do they value more? The Narset, which is suppressing my Commander, given that my Necro card draw is out of the loop and my draw for the turn is gone. Or do they value the Karn more? And my opponent chooses, surprising to me, to kill the Narset. I actually think that they probably should have killed the Karn, because once they killed the Narset, they just freed my Commander. So for the first time, I can actually get my Commander down in this game, and yeah, let's just Ancestral, or Tidings rather, and this game's about over at this point. Alright, so I'm going to play an Urborg, and then I'm going to go ahead and just replay Rog, and pass for the turn, because I can't Necro, and I'm kind of good here. I would have liked to have killed some mana over there, but it's mostly okay. My opponent can probably subtract Karn and then use it to go get Jace, and that's going to be a bit of a bummer, but it's not horrible because I have Breach now, and with Breach I can actually Breach and then Rampage, and so there's good things about to happen, right? Anyway, my opponent does grab the Jace, still has an island sitting over there for Karn in the Karn zone, plays the Jace, and decides to plus. I don't fully understand the choice here, except, no, I guess I do, because if they zero it and it's not a playable card, and it more than likely it won't be, then Liliana just takes it anyway. So they might as well just plus. So they plus and leave whatever my top card is on top. Alright, I'm losing some more life to the Crypt. Of course, I don't have the draw phase anymore. Alright. But I do get to Ritual. And so we Ritual for tons of mana, obviously. and Imperial Seal. See if you can figure out which card I got. Let you think about it for a moment. Anyway, I'm going to make us bold discard just to put a counter on that thing. We'll throw away the Ancient Tomb there, which Necro will exile. I'm going to sacrifice and draw 3 cards. And ta-da! Even though I have the Breach in my hand, I have a much better turn. So I actually put Rog in the grave, and I can go get Yogg Will. Yogg Will do what Breach will do, only a little bit better, so let's do that. So I'm going to Will, sneak the Ritual out first. Try to make sure you play the Cabal Ritual first so that you don't remove too many cards from your graveyard. Anyway, and we'll get the Rog out now. Imperial Seal once again. And then at this point, Colossum concedes, realizing that the game is certainly over. Going to Angrith's. I'm going to abrade away the Pithing Needle, of course. So Necro's back on. I get to Angrith's away one of my opponent's Planeswalkers. I get to then Jeska's Will, the top card of my library, into my hand if I want to play it. Or I can wait on it till next turn. I've got Strip Mine going. Yeah, this game's super over. Just a really interesting game, though. Managed to beat a Pithing Needle on Necropotence. And, yeah, this deck's just very resilient. Alright, so this... 1, 2, 3... I think that was this game. We'll take a look. If that was this game, then... If this was not... Ah, no. So this was a... different game? Or is this the one where my opponent needles my no, this is a new game. Okay, so, sorry, next game. So, yeah, so we start a new game, and my opponent leads off just like this, and I have a modestly good hand, but not necessarily an insane hand or anything. Always Skull Clamp, though, is deceptively better than you might think. And, of course, I have Grim Monolith. So, yeah, I get to play out the Skull Clamp here, and it sticks, which I'm very happy to see happen against this start. Because it's basically an Ancestral Recall off Rog. In fact, that's like 4 cards, because 0, draw 2, 2 mana, draw 2 more cards. You know, you gotta clamp it first, but yeah. So that's a lot of cards that I just put into play. And my opponent does not play their commander here, which is, of course, a huge tell. So let's feel it out a little bit. Let's see what happens. Mana Vault, okay. Mana Vault, not okay. Alright. How about... I clear my command or mana pool, thinking that I'm going to then play Rog and clamp it. But oh no, opponent's got an Abrade too, unfortunately, so okay. Alright, so we're expecting to see the commander come down now. Opponent's now got 2 blue mana up because it taps for mana of any color. Totally insane. What an insane card. Alright. So for my turn, I did draw Brutality. This is no longer in the deck. This is unfortunate. This card, I believe, is Gamble, which I would certainly rather have right here, but it is Brutality in this game. Alright. Isn't it? Yeah. So I just play Monolith there. What's going on here? Are we bugging? Oh no, it's a bugged game. Well, another game ruined by Magic Online. I cannot tell you what happened in that game. I do apologize. I do know that I won. I don't know how. That's disappointing. All right. Well, we'll just move on to the next one that I lost, and just have to suck it up on that one. Was that on the 13th? Oh, I see the problem. It's because I'm digging into the wrong game set. Okay. I'm sure one of you may have noticed and was yelling at the screen like, "Hey, you're playing the 13th." Okay. So that was the old build. No wonder it looked weird. All right, so we're going to move into the 14th, and continue with the series. This is Game 3 against Colossum on the 14th, which is with the proper build. This may be the game that we've already seen. I guess not. And you can see, oh, yeah, I did have a test slot here. I was testing out Rakdos Return. Rakdos' Return was another card that this actually became the Batterskull, and it would have been perfectly fine here. Rakdos Return ends up being insane in this game, but you know, this is, I was looking for all the things that I described when I added Batterskull to the deck, so You know, obviously this would have been a turn 1 batter skull here, which I'm pretty sure would win a game. Oh, it's so gross. Look at this. Let's just start drawing cards right away. And yeah, and then Imperial Seal for even more good stuff. And my opponent has a mental misstep, so no. Alright, so my opponent did have to mulligan, but plays a Dockside Extortionist. Somebody suggested the card for this deck. Someone else answered him. I like the person's answer. We are trying to smash artifacts pretty heavily. It's almost never useful, and even when it is useful here, you're like, whoa, they got 3 treasures, that's really strong. Well, actually, they spent 2 mana to get 3. This is a really crappy Dark Ritual. Unless you're getting like 4+ mana, or if you have like a deck where you're going to untap and then just do something insane on the next turn. But otherwise, in this deck where you're kind of looking at rituals and you'd be replacing Dockside, like maybe you play like, say, Cabal, the Cabal Ritual with Dockside, for example, doesn't make as much sense. It probably won't do anything most of the time because we kill artifacts so hard. And when it does do something, it'll be a lot like this, where it's just very, very mediocre in general. But my opponent does get to run out of Narset. I mean, and that is good. And hey, there's that Mystic Confluence again. So my opponent's got 3 cards in hand. And of course, I imagine you see what's coming here, but this is a pretty nasty turn. Of course, we would have had a Batter Skull in play and just be smashing, and we would just attack and probably kill. They'd chump, and then after that, Narset would die the next turn. But, you know, this is perfectly fine too. I'll take it. How about kill your Narset and discard all your hand? Yeah. That's a game. Alright. And of course, Colosseum knows it and scoops. There's not even top decking Time Twister here. 6, 7, 8. The best thing you could top deck right here would be Treasure Cruise, actually. That would be the way to get out. So if you're running Cruise, you keep and you look for your next card, and then you probably scoop if you don't hit it. Anyway, that was the 3rd game against Colosseum. The 4th one I lose. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Dockside Extortionist, not really a fit in this deck, I don't think. And oh yeah, my opponent switched decks. I actually hadn't realized he switched decks. It kind of caught me off guard. And of course, that opening hand was not a keeper, but the second hand is extremely good against the blue deck. It's not as good against Prosper Tonebound. This is another really busted, like, let's say we couldn't play Tevesh Szat. Say it gets banned the way that I think it should be. This would probably be the next commander to use in the same color combination that would still create a massive amount of headaches and problems for your opponent. You could probably switch Tevesh Szat for this and be perfectly fine. It's just cards like this in the command zone are just really, really scary. Cards that just draw cards so easily are scary. And this card makes not just cards, but it also makes mana. So we wouldn't be as good off as well off as we are, obviously, or we'd be running it. But we'd be in a pretty good situation here. Anyway, I'm gonna Thoughtseize, and I make a huge foul up. Well, maybe, I don't know. I take Layla. This is not a bad pull. This is a very nasty card, especially when your opponent has Lotus Petal, Arcane Signet, and such. I take Layla there, but and then my opponent has this. This is my opponent's hand. Valky, and what you're going to see is a little bit later, I'm going to make a huge screw up that cost me this game. So, opponent, gets a land, Arcane Signet. I have nothing. It's Prosper, Tonebound. Exiles their, I'm of course fetching. Opponent exiles their, so this is what my opponent's hand was. So they've got Lotus Petal, Valky, and then they prosper into a land. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and kill the Prosper. And of course my opponent's played my deck so many times he knows not to play Valky in an attempt to disrupt me. He knows to save it for the reverse side of the card. Opponent plays, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Close. There's Prosper again, so the petal's gone. And Prosper's out another land, so crap. It's getting kind of scary over there. So here's the turn I screw up. So the correct play here, see if you can figure out what it is, but it's not that hard to figure out. I can't let Valky sit in my opponent's hand over there indefinitely. That card is going to wreck me. And I can plus Liliana, so the Prosper actually can't kill the Liliana. So the correct play for me here is actually to be willing to give up Sorin, potentially, because I just don't need it that much, and get this Valky out of my opponent's hand. I should play Strip Mine, cast the Thran, cast the Talisman, Inquisition my opponent, take Valky out of my opponent's hand, and then plus Liliana, or not, depending on what I see, depending on whether I'm willing to throw away my Sorin. More than likely the answer would be yes, plussing it. So I inexplicably make this play and play Sorin, throw out a blocker, or yeah, don't even throw out a blocker, just draw a card, and throw away Inquisition. And then my opponent plays Tybalt, and I will summarize the game for you. Tybalt kills me, like exactly what it should do, like the stupidest, boneheadedest play on my part, and I just give the game away. So I lose that one against Colossum and vow never to make that mistake again. All right, so we move into the next game, and hopefully I won't do something quite so dunderheaded. And he switches decks again, switches to his Ragavan deck. I've got this exceptional hand here, and I'm going first. Yeah, I was talking to him, I was like, what a stupid move on my part. Just letting him have his commander. It's just so boneheaded. All right, opponent leads off with land, Amber, Ragavan. Fortunately, cannot play dash cost with the Amber until the Ragavan's out. And then Commander's Plate. This card is a very frustrating card to have to deal with, actually. Very threatening. Fortunately, I've got a pretty fast hand, so we're off to the races here. I decide that the way to do this is to imprint there and Vandal Blast away the plate. It's too scary, and I can make a blocker for Ragavan, and let's see if maybe we can stop it from hitting me. Opponent plays Magda, so it's going to be able to make tokens by attacking, and can tutor out a dragon eventually, potentially. Alright, so we'll get a blocker out, draw for the turn. I decide that against a deck like that, I'm really deciding, do I want another blocker, because it's so important to make sure Ragavan never hits me. So I'm thinking about whether or not I want to do that, but I'm kind of torn, because if I put all my hopes in these big artifact blockers, especially with such a juicy board, my opponent has like Vandal Blast or one of the other multi-artifact removal spells, then I have no blocker, and I probably lose the game on the spot. So after thinking about it, I believe I choose to just float mana here and not make a robot, and just play my commander and make blockers. I'm just going to play it safe, relatively safe, right? I mean, obviously, my opponent blows up. If he Vandal Blasts me, boom, 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 boom. I've got blockers, so I'm still like in the game, even though it's horrible. But if I didn't do this, then I would 100% be out of the game if I get Vandal Blasted here. I don't, but I get Fiery Confluence, which is still pretty darn bad, right? So we'll kill the Soul Ring, the Mox, which also the land that went with it, and the Construct, which of course was not a real card, so that kind of balances out the Mox, the loss of the Mox. But this is still super, super brutal. Opponent then gets to attack, gets a treasure from the tapped dwarf there, and I'm in jump block mode. And I can for some reason he attacks my face, not my Tevesh. So yeah, I can totally let that hit my face. So good on that one. Alright, I'm going to fetch my tap land here. Time there's a little window to do that. And let's play Rog and draw some cards. Beautiful. Back in the game. Alright, so I got Mox Amber here. And just like that, we're totally back in this game, right? I just had my opponent blow out 1, 2, 3, Mox Diamond, Soul Ring, and a blocker, blow me down to, blast me down to just like 2 lands, and then all of a sudden the next turn I play double Planeswalker. Just amazing deck. Now again, my opponent potentially could remove my creatures. Of course, Fiery Confluence would have been one of the ways to do it, but it would have killed his creature, so I guess not. But yeah, something like that. Some removal here. Maybe they have like whatever. You can imagine. And then things are a little bit dicey because Ragavan gets through. But at least I have the chance of that not happening. And with the Construct in play, it discourages both creatures from attacking. So I'm feeling a lot better about my circumstances here. Not great. My opponent plays Goldspan Dragon, Flying Haste. Treasure's now tapped for 2. and whenever it becomes the target, you create a treasure. This is a card that possibly could be in this deck. It's kind of sick. Brutal card. If you're going to replace the Batter Skull, you probably could replace it with Goldspan Dragon. It about does the same thing most of the time. It doesn't kill all the Planeswalkers. I don't think you should in this deck. I think that having a card we can cheat out with Chop and all the other things that I mentioned are a little too good, but you could. This is a Idol of Oblivion. It's a really interesting card. Tap to draw a card if you've created a token this turn. Seems like it'd be really good in this deck, although you're typically eating your commanders. I don't know. I mean, this deck, it would allow you to Tevesh Szat and just draw one extra card for the turn, and of course you can make a 10-10 with it, but that's irrelevant. It's definitely a card that's worth considering for a deck like this, as an extra source of card draw, possibly. But the issue with it is that if you have your commander in play, you're probably winning the game. And so this is just kind of a win more thing. You know, you're just making more. So it really doesn't fit in here quite so well as it does in a deck that pukes out treasure tokens as frequently and easily as my opponent's deck does. Now my opponent strip mines here. Cannot understand. I guess they're trying to pinch my mana, but I've got card drawing going. So I think if I'm them, I kill the Wasteland to keep so that he can keep his War Room in play, which will allow him to draw more cards. I don't think I agree with that play there. Either way, though, obviously I don't have to. That was just the play that my opponent made. So go ahead and play Rog and draw 3 more cards. Beautiful. Alright, so we'll play a land here, kill the dragon, obviously. And for the turn, we'll just run out Coalition Relic and pass. Nice defensive position. So hard to contain this. Like, how much mana is my opponent killed, right? But it's just so hard to contain this. I want to play Sticky Fingers, another really interesting card. Enchanted creature has menace. Whenever it deals damage to a player, create a treasure. And when the enchanted creature dies, draw a card. So this card really is pretty nuts. But it is still not great. Opponent can kill Chandra if they attack both creatures into Chandra, because it can only block one, because this is menace, I have to block with 2 creatures. So they can kill Chandra here, but I will get to kill the Magda with the Sticky Fingers on it. And I'm actually okay with that trade. And so anyway, that is but it also means that the monkey's not hitting me, right? So my opponent attacks in, this is attacking Chandra, and this is attacking face. So this is, oh no, sorry, this is attacking Chandra. So if I'm my opponent, I might have considered attacking Chandra and face here. And then if they're attacking me face, then I'm in a bad spot, because I want to block and protect Chandra, but I don't want to get hit by Ragavan. To the point that I probably would let Chandra die and protect myself from Ragavan. That's how deadly Ragavan is, actually. Because that's how good this deck is, and I don't want to face my own deck. So I actually assume that's what my opponent's doing, so I just block there, like thinking that like there's no way that he didn't do the exact play I just described. So I was definitely having some misplays on the 14th here, not really paying close enough attention. And my opponent runs out a Shattering Spree, just more wreck the house plays against me. Just so brutal. But I still have Tevesh going. I'm going to strip mine that War Room. Even though I've had tons of mana blown up, I'm still playing a strip mine here, which is just crazy. And then I'm running out Necropotence and just refilling my hand just like that. And just like that, I am way ahead of this opponent, right? So my opponent gets a mountain for the turn. Has the Magda. Of course, I have to double chump if I want to block. That's fine. I'll do that. Because they're attacking Tevesh Szat, and I'd really love to ult Tevesh and take Ragavan out of the picture regardless of where it's at. And also, you know, at 10, if I ult, he'll actually he'll jump back into play with 5 counters on him, so that's a good thing. And then my other commander Rog will jump into play, and then I can immediately Ancestral if I want to. Although with Necrobones running is not as important, of course. Instead, my opponent plays Chandra there. Pluses, sees a Mana Form Hellkite, interesting choice. Nasty choice too. And then just gets some mana, deals damage to me rather. Alright, so I've got Crypt and Necro, and I've got my opponent's got some direct damage effects going, so I do need to get some of this squared away here. But I have a pretty insane start. Let's start by taking control of everything and drawing some extra cards. And this just went from bad to worse from my opponent, obviously. I'm going to put Rog in the graveyard here. Let's go ahead and Ritual, play the Lotus, sack the Lotus. The rest my opponent. I see Glorybringer and Inferno of the Star Mounts, just more pretty gross stuff. A lot of haste creatures that can kill planeswalkers and pressure you right off the bat, right? Anyway, gonna make my opponent sack a planeswalker. Chandra is a good choice. Thank you, opponent. And then Yogg will. And now it gets real stupid. We've got Lotus mana again. Rog comes back for free. To play the we even get to play the Mox Diamond thanks to finding the land off of the Tevesh Szat second activation for the turn. To Ritual here, play 0 mana cards for days. Gonna imprint. What do I choose to imprint there? Fiery Confluence, because I've got a bunch of 1 toughness guys, and you know it's bad when you have 3 artifacts in play and your opponent imprints Fiery Confluence. Like that's not a good sign for what's going on for your turn. I decided to play Saga over Wasteland. Of course, there's really no target for Wasteland anyway. We'll go ahead and spin out some artifact mana again. Play Duretti. Use Duretti, sacking the Lotus this time to kill the Magda. And finally, my opponent's had enough. This turn isn't even over yet. But yeah, the game is. So, opponent gives up. Rightfully so, obviously. And that's a good game. So yeah, we get to use all the mistakes of the past. As Ryan texted me, we were talking back and forth, and he said, yeah, this deck's insane because you're basically playing with. I mean, one of the things we talked about is that in the build, I'll go back to the next game, is that effectively, if you look at it, so this is a Mox. This is basically almost always a Mox. This is almost always a Mox, like a classic Mox, right? These cards are Moxes. This card might as well be a Mox in this format. In terms of 0 mana, give me mana, like I pay 0, give me mana right now, right? So, you know, in the old days you had 5 Moxes, you know, you had Ruby, Sapphire, whatever. And then you had a Soul Ring, which we have, and then you had a Black Lotus, which we have. So if you look at the deck in the old days, 5 Moxes, Soul Ring, Lotus. Yeah, I got 5 Moxes, Soul Ring, Lotus. I even do a little better because I've got some other really busted stuff like these guys and these guys and this thing. So it's almost like I have, you know, 3, 4 Black Lotuses rather than just 1. And that's what just makes this deck so ridiculous. So anyway, one of the things that makes it ridiculous. So we'll move on to the next game here. We're playing against Lou Solarium on the 14th. And Lou, I don't know if all these games are good or not, but, you know, will hopefully be interesting. Look at this hand. This hand just makes you want to cry. Here it proves it's not actually a Black Lotus, but, you know, come on, it's mostly a Black Lotus, right? It's pretty close. But here, because it's not, it's a mulligan. To be honest, even if this was the actual Black Lotus, I'm not sure that I would keep it anyway. You know, you could Lotus out a Talisman and then play Rog and haste in or something, but I don't love it, so I just mulligan anyway. It isn't a Black Lotus, I think. Oh, I choose not to mulligan. Interesting. Okay, well, I keep then. Oh, I remember I texted someone about this. I completely misclick. I glanced at the Lotus and I saw Rog and I was like, this is a great hand. And I just click keep. Totally, as I said, 14th for me was a day of misplays, and yeah. So I end up on my first turn playing nothing, and my opponent on their first turn draws a card and plays Soul Ring. So this is a bad day for me, but luckily I top deck, or a bad game for me. I top deck Mana Confluence and Vandal Blast Szat, and so I'm still in the game. Opponent draws and plays a land and does nothing. I play Rag, and nothing. Opponent draws and does not have removal. And I get to hit him with Rag, and if you get to hit your opponent Ragavan, you're usually winning the game. So what do you do here? Well, I decide I'll just play the Talisman here. I'm going to take it slow. I could have played the Commander there, but this sets me up for the Commander next turn if they deal with Ragavan, which I'm expecting them to play a land and play their blocker. They do. They play a 3/4 flyer that exiles my graveyard, so okay. Alright, so now we'll just play the Commander and draw some cards, and then hopefully we'll just hit some land and we'll be good to go. I do not find any land. I do find a Mana Crypt, so that's cool, and I do have a Deflecting Swat, which could be useful. So don't forget Rog costs 2, so we'll just sneak him into play right now. And yeah, I'm just gonna have to discard. So I throw away by force. I don't see any more artifacts over there, and I still have K command if that changes. All right, so my opponent plays this. So the first foretold card they play each turn costs 0. One or more cards are put in exile from hand, or a spell ability you control exiles one or more permanents from the battlefield. Create a flyer. So interesting. Opponent then, of course, attacks Tevesh Szat. Yeah. Now they've got a blocker for Rag there. And am I going to draw some land this game? I mean, I did draw 1, and I honestly had like almost no right to that one, considering that I got it right on time. Anyway, I'm going to look for draw 3 cards, and nope, I'm not going to draw any land this game. But hey, I got a Soul Ring, so sometimes that's good enough. Most of the time, quite frankly, that's good enough. All right, so Soul Ring into Thran into Signet, I believe, with 1 floating. And I'm going to actually get rid of Rag here and just tutor. And I tutor for Rograkh. And kill that. And screw up again, because today was a day of screw ups. So whenever a permanent is exiled, my opponent gets a 1/1 flyer. So if I just played that during my opponent's upkeep, yes, they could counterspell, but I'm not reading a counterspell from this opponent. And then they would have a 1/1 flyer and not be able to kill Tevesh Szat right here. So that was painfully bad. Fortunately, I might be able to scrounge up enough mana to recast Tevesh Szat if it dies here. So there is that. But it will take me off deflecting SWAT, which is, bad news. All right, so my opponent plays another, I don't know, creature. And attacks and kills my commander, of course. All right, so for my turn, oh, nice, top deck an Ancient Tomb. So still don't have an actual land, but I did draw a second one this game. I only have 1, but yeah, not bad to see. And I'm going to go ahead and him my opponent. I get a land and a Vega the Watcher. Okay. And from here, I play Tevesh Szat, make some blockers. I'm seeing 2, 4, 5, so I'm not seeing that my opponent can kill Tevesh Szat here, and this sets me up for a lovely game-ending Death Cloud. Hopefully. And for my opponent's turn, yeah, they swing in. They foretell something, I think. I don't know why they tap 2 mana there. Unless we're bugging. I do get to chump there also, so Tevesh Szat's in pretty good shape. My opponent didn't have any removal for the creatures. So he was mostly doing fine. Alright, and then for my turn, I've got just enough to do it for all. So I just blow the Death Cloud on exactly what it needs to be. Anyway, I cast the Death Cloud. My opponent does not have a counter. If they did, I'd deflecting swat it, but they don't. And yeah, kills everything my opponent's drawn for the entire game. I lose everything here. I make 2 thralls and my opponent concedes. And never even have to will all this nasty stuff in the graveyard, which is pretty interesting and pretty funny. So for a huge, a poorly played game and a first turn done go, play nothing and pass with no lands in hand, still managed to win the game, but only against a deck that obviously was a pet deck, not a cEDH. That obviously was not a cEDH opponent, but still it feels pretty good to know that the deck is resilient enough to be able to weather such a terrible play and such poor choices. Anyway, so for my first hand's a mulligan, my second hand's insane. We'll keep this. And I throw a Mind Twist against this opponent. I'm thinking that I can worry about their hand later, but for now, what I want to focus on is just developing my board and getting my, I guess it's not insane, rather, it's very good. Potentially, but I need some mana. So yeah, don't get any. Opponent, on the other hand, has a ton. I do top deck a Liquid Metal Torque here, so I could feed the Swarm, and I think about it and decide, yeah, I am going to feed the Swarm, but I'm going to use it to kill something that I can't normally kill. As much as I'd love to, say, Strip Mine that, there's no guarantee I'm going to get a Strip Mine. And Llanowar Elves are very easy to kill, so I would rather kill the Wild Growth here, because I can't actually destroy Karametra if it gets down, and I don't want it coming down next turn if I can help it. Frustrating. All right, well, I'm gonna have to play the Dark Confidant here. I still don't have mana. So what I thought it was an insane hand, but for whatever reason, my brain was telling me that Karn could be played off the workshop. My brain was wrong. All right, Karametra is down, and yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it is unfortunate. However, it doesn't pressure me heavily as long as it doesn't become active. So I get to Confidant and start getting back in the game. And you can see I had Chromatic Lantern in this game. I believe I've cut that. Yeah, I have cut it. I was playing around with it. I really like Lantern in this deck for this exact reason. I just couldn't quite justify that last slot for it. But this was, as you can see, it was a slot I was playing around with. And of course here it ends up being incredibly good. So we'll go ahead and make Karametra an artifact and tell my opponent to sacrifice it. Indestructible does not beat sacrifices, so now I've bought a little bit of turn, and I decide not to swing with Dark Confidant. So the reason I don't swing is my opponent's 1 mana off from Karametra. I'm assuming my opponent wants to attack me, knowing that nobody blocks with Dark Confidant, and then as soon as they do, I'm going to block with Dark Confidant because I've already drawn a card. At this point, it's removal that drew a card, and I can refill my hand no problem. So I am very disappointed when my opponent actually chooses not to attack right there. But I draw a Springleaf Drum, which is pretty nice because, you know, it's extra mana. And I can, as a matter of fact, play Necro here, and I still have mana to play Karn as well. So I'm going to throw that down. And with Karn on board, so first we're going to Necro for a bunch. Because I drew the Drum and the Monolith and I got enough mana, with Karn on board, what I actually decide to do is I make the Llanowar Elf an artifact creature. I activate Liquid Metal Torque. I don't think this is what happened here. Oh, during my... Yeah, that's right. I plus up Karn, and then during my opponent's upkeep, I activate Torque, and I make this an artifact creature. So my opponent's still 2 mana off from playing Karametra a second time, because Karn will prevent this creature from activating right now. It has no abilities. Or it has abilities it cannot use. Opponent then Rex Sages me, and decides... I think reasonably wisely to kill Necro, although frankly at this point I might kill Torque if I was my opponent. Frankly at this point the game's over, but you know, killing Necro makes sense. Unfortunately, I get to just use it in response. Opponent does play a land there, attacks in, and yeah, we take a counter off a Karn. Alright, so his guy's usable again. We'll have to deal with that Llanowar Elf in a second. But in the meantime, let's get some mana into play. Lots of it. And my opponent, kill both of their creatures. Now, opponent's still 1 mana off from their commander. And let's play Tevesh Szat and just make some guys and pass. And the reason I just make some guys is if my opponent's down to 1 card in hand. If they draw and they play land, they play Karametra, then so be it. In a couple of turns, Tevesh Szat can just yoink their commander away from them anyway. All right. So I over Necro slightly and pass. When it does top deck, or has the land that they need, so they get their Karametra back into play. I'm not terrified by Karametra, but if I can prevent my opponent from getting free stuff, I'm going to prevent him from getting free stuff. So we'll go ahead and play Dust Bowl here, produce some more Thralls, attack, Necro for just a tiny little bit, and pass. I could Dust Bowl here, but I'm kind of taking it easy. I'm trying to decide if I want to use like K-Command, Opposition Agent, or just exactly what. Opposition Agent also does a very good job of making Karametra not do anything useful. So I'm expecting to Opposition Agent here in response to something. But also the other reason for not Dust Bowling right away is that my opponent might have a Wasteland or something. Also, I may want to use the Saga. So there's a lot of things that I could be doing here. So I just want to wait and see. I don't feel like particularly pressured. Alright, so I make my opponent discard. There's no creature in the graveyard for me to return, so I just deal 2 to them. I probably should have thought of that and sacrificed. I could have sacrificed Rog and then K-commanded to make them discard and then pick the Rog back up, but, you know, didn't need to in this case. Alright, so we'll use Saga this way, and then we'll go ahead and Dust Bowl. Alright. Grabbing a card here. And untapping Mana Vault. I'm going to make another robot who, is now an 11/11, right? Gets skull clamps. This is the other reason for not needing to sacrifice creatures to draw cards, right? All right. Let's bash in for 14. And back to my main phase. I'm going to go ahead and draw some cards. Well, play a Karn, actually. And what do I do? Oh, yeah, I created a construct. So I've got 3 13/13s, a boatload of guys. I can ultimate Tevesh. I've got all this stuff going on. I can still opposition agent if my opponent draws like a search spell, say the green and white search for any creature card, or if they try to use their Karametra. So pretty much, or if they like draw Tooth and Nail or something, they wouldn't have enough mana to actually kick it, so it wouldn't matter too much. But yeah, I've got lethal in play. If my opponent has like a Wrath of God effect, it's fine. I can probably figure out how to win from that position. They do not. So we just attack for 39. And the opponent dies. No need to BM there. Or at least I wasn't feeling it. Alright, so we'll go back to... so that game is over. We'll go back to the next round. So we're playing against Tippy 21. Tippy Canoe 21. And just Tippy. Alright, so... Tippy here, also playing Karametra? Is that right? No, that was the game we saw. I'm sorry, I misattributed that game. All right, Dots. Dots is a cEDH player. Dots has played against this deck a few times. Dots is always a challenge. Dots is a great way to test your might against somebody who's played some serious Magic. And yeah, so I've got a stellar hand. Playing the mirror match, and I'm definitely not going to mulligan. And fortunately, I won the die roll in the mirror, unfortunately, or whatever, but winning the die roll is pretty important, as it often is in Magic, but even more so in this specific situation. Even more so in the mirror match, specifically of Tevesh Szat, because the first Tevesh can steal the other Tevesh Szat. Is basically what ends up happening. So I'm going to go ahead and run out a Wasteland here. My opponent vamps in response, or strip mine here rather. So I could play Thran Dynamo here and pass, but I actually have enough mana, believe it or not, to play Tevesh Szat. I've got 6 mana left over, so let's Ancestral instead, or Tidings. And I'm in a great spot here. Best thing my opponent can do is go get artifact mana most of the time, or some way to ritual out Necro, or get their commander in play. But if they do get their commander in play, and they can start plussing it up and kind of get ahead of me because I use the draw ability instead of the +2. But I'm still feeling pretty good about the situation overall. Ancient Tombs and Arcane Signet, and obviously we're gonna get some more mana going here. Rog, and abrade the Signet, holding the Shattering Spree. Mainly because I could have done that differently, but I do it with the abrade just because I'm thinking that it's fairly mana efficient here, but also there's a good chance that if my opponent gets back into the game, it'll have to be an artifact dump turn where they puke out a bunch of artifacts, and so the Shattering Spree most likely... I mean, this does make me weaker if they get a Dark Confidant, but it makes me stronger in most other cases, I think. So I run out the Coalition Relic. Of course I drew the Naughty Skull Clamp here, so I'm just going to play Rog first though. I can kind of slow roll it. And Imperial Seal. See if you can figure out what to get. Well, Dots just scoops because Dots knows what I'm going to go get. I'm gonna kill the I'm just gonna kill the Taliesin, let him have the Ancient Tomb for one more turn, and I'm just gonna like play Tevesh and draw some cards, and plus Tevesh, draw some cards up to Skull Clamp. Then my opponent's 1 or 2 turns away from me stealing both of his commanders, and of course I'm going to disrupt, like I said. But the card I went and got was Deathclap, because if my opponent doesn't immediately kill me, then I will immediately kill my opponent on the next turn, right? So we'll just draw, restore the hand, and then break my opponent's back with the DC. Dots knows it. We've played before, so he scoops. All right, Colossum, another cEDH game for sure. And I have a very Prosper, the one that beat me the other day or earlier. I can't remember the same day or last time we played, but very frustrating. It's the one where I beat myself basically because I didn't take the right card. So I'm not going to duress the wrong card this time. Fortunately, I also did win the die roll. Once again, very important in these matches. And my opponent's got a hand that's extremely resilient to duress effect. And they've got Blood Moon, Demonic Tutor, March of Reckless Joy, Vampiric Tutor, March. Really strange card. Red X. You may exile cards from your hand. Two less. Exile the top X cards. You may play up to 2 of those. I think the card's too slow, but it's going to work out for my opponent here because of the Blood Moon. But I am going to take. This is a hard choice. Both Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor are problematic. But I decide that I'm going to take the Vampiric and not the Demonic. And the reason is, I'm thinking that if I take the Vampiric and my opponent plays a land and passes, I might be able to Wasteland them, play the Expedition map, keep them off the Demonic Tutor for another turn, and then potentially I get just enough ahead where I can play a land and play the Torque. Then they finally tutor, and then from there, or I play the land and I sack my map and I go get Ancient Tomb. And I get just enough ahead to where I get to play my commander before they get to play theirs, is what I'm thinking. So even though Demonic Tutor is a card down for them, I'm actually going to take it here for tempo. Because tempo matters more than cards in this specific scenario. This is going to show both sides. I dislike that. But. Alright, so opponent plays Badlands and passes. So excellent. Of course, I know they have Blood Moon, so I'm going to go ahead and get a basic land. And when I draw the monkey, this changes things for me because I play this to get around the Blood Moon that I know my opponent has. But I draw the Ragavan thinking, hey, let's get a hit in with that thing. It's too gross and too good in the high-powered deck battle. Typically, if you get hit with Ragavan once, you probably lost the game. If you get hit more than once, you almost certainly lost the game. In this case, my opponent gets hit once and definitely loses the game. It finds me a Jeweled Lotus, right? Just so gross. And I have a treasure token as well. Ragavan back to Hen. And, yeah. Colosseum says, you little shit, talking to the Ragavan. He says, bad monkey. I just kind of laugh. That's good-natured response there. All right, so my opponent's turn. They get to play the Swamp. And, of course, can Demonic Tutor, should he choose. Opponent does choose, so that's going to happen, and more than likely that means Mana Crypt is coming down, of course. Alright, so for my turn, I've got Ragavan again, potentially, or I can just get in with my commander. Knowing that, of course it's the mirror, my opponent could very easily kill that Lotus. I'd like to use the Lotus before it dies, so I'm going to play the commander first. And so I do that, and I'm going to go ahead and draw some cards, too. And see if I can find a way to kill that Mana Crypt, right? Well, I don't. But I do find Dark Ritual, Ragavan, Diabolic Intent, Dark Confidant. I've got some plays here. And I've got Wasteland as well. So it's kind of an interesting decision point on this. I could possibly, I could play Snow-Covered Mountain, Dark Ritual. I don't know how you would sequence this exactly. But anyway, what I decided to do is Dark Ritual into... getting extra mana into play, getting extra card drawing into play, and then since I got extra mana into play, I'm going to, and card drawing, I'm going to throw down Ragavan here, and my thought is that I can, as much as I want to Wasteland my opponent, and I do, my opponent does have the ability to play their commander next turn, but if I do this, and my opponent just plays their commander and doesn't necessarily do anything too stellar, because I don't see anything over here that's a particular problem to me. Then what I can do is possibly just tutor for removal, which I want to do anyway. I have to kill that thing, and then smack him with the monkey again, which is always bad for the opponent, especially in the mirror, right? So, or essentially the mirror. Especially when, we're playing the same colors, though, so I don't even have to use the treasures. I can bank treasures and use regular mana to play the cards that I find. Alright, so the Seer Step, so that's gone. And for my opponent's turn, they top deck or had Fury. Yuck. So, Ragavan dead, Confidant dead, Tevesh Szat loses 2 counters, and the threat's in play, sitting there waiting to attack and kill Tevesh Szat. Gross. Alright, so for my turn, I'm going to play a Mox for sure and throw away Urborg. I always like to do that in the mirror. Whenever I can, because I don't want to give my opponent extra mana. I'm going to Tevesh some blockers, and then I'm going to tutor. And I tutor for the Ready. So with the Ready, I can now play the Ready, kill their Mana Crypt immediately, sacking the Torque. It's a bit of a risk here, but I can also wasteland my opponent, and suddenly I'm not scared of Prosper. I do have the ability, as far as I know, my opponent has only 1 unknown card, and they don't have the ability to kill this Thrall token that I know of. And if they can't kill the Thrall token, then they can't kill the Ready. And if they can't kill the Ready, I can quickly make a wall of impassable, you shall not pass tokens. And then I've got control of the game because my opponent's extremely mana pinched now. For my opponent's turn, they March of Reckless Joy, exiling the Blood Moon, I believe. Yeah. So the Moon's gone, the March is gone, and the cards they get are Wooded Foothills and Command Tower. So they can play both of those cards over the course of the next 2 turns, I think. Yeah, till the end of their next turn. So the pretty interesting card here. So that actually fixes their mana issues to some degree. They're left with this Grim Hireling and 2 unknowns in play, and of course they're going to attack, and I'm going to block. But my opponent's definitely going to hit a land drop next turn because they've got Command Tower on the side, 3 cards in hand. So even if I could take all 3 cards out of hand like a Mind Twist, I still can't stop Prosper from coming down. So I've got some problems here, but I do have another land destruction card here in the hand, right? So we'll go ahead and make some guys who we can then convert into mana, should I choose. And I'm pretty sure I do choose. What's going on here? Oh no, we're bugging out. Ah, sugar. Okay, well, we bug out, but phooey. I think what happens is I ritual. And then for 4, so I have 5 mana, or sorry, 1, 2, and then I sack this. I have 5 mana. I send 3 on the map, which leaves me with 2, and I go get Dust Bowl. And then with the 3rd land, I sacrifice a mountain. I kill his dual land here, and then I make a the Ready token, and I end up with Thrall and the Ready in play. And then my opponent draws and realizes like they can play their land, but they have no play of significance. Can't get Prosper down. They're still a mana short. And then I get to just Dust Bowl their lands to death. Chump block with the Thrall. Use the Ready to kill Fury. Make more Thralls. Dust Bowl my opponent a 2nd time, taking out their other land, their Command Tower. Because at this point the Crypt is gone. Then I kill the Command Tower. Right, you see how it goes. So my opponent will never get enough mana to play their commander while I've got 2 planeswalkers running. And excuse me, so just like that, Colossum scoops. So we move on to the next game. I know this is a bit of a long video, but I feel like the games with this deck are a bit short. So it's more important to run you through a lot of games than in the style that I do sometimes, rather than focus too much on any one game because, there just isn't a lot to the games sometimes, because sometimes you just blow the opponent out of the water. He switched decks again back to the Prismari. I've got an amazing hand, so we'll just keep that. It's quite good. My opponent does have to mulligan here, which is excellent for me. I don't want to get a Crypt countered. I do want to potentially have Rack and Ruin up if my opponent ends up playing like a, land, Soul Ring, Artifact Mana or whatever. So I'm just going to play it this way and pass. It does make the Crypt a little vulnerable, but it's okay. Opponent Gitaxian Probes, so the jig is up on any trick I might have had with that. I'm going to go ahead and fetch in response to fetch because I don't want to get stifled. And my opponent plays Pithing Needle. Well, fortunately, I'm not going to walk into the same problem that I had before. In fact, there's no targets from my opponent here other than my commander, which I'm sure they're going to name. So what I can do is I just let it hit. I managed to properly have my land sacrificed before it hits. And I get to Vampiric Tutor here. So this is an interesting quandary. What do you go get here? I think this is actually really interesting. There's a Pithing Needle naming Tevesh Szat. I have Rack and Ruin, but there's no second target. You get all those choices. What do you go get? What do you go get? I'll let you think about it for a moment, but I am going to continue. And I'll show you what I chose to do. It's a different line than what I might have... I don't know if it's an obvious line. Maybe it is for some, but for me, I actually had to kind of think it through and realize that this is the route that I wanted to take. So I draw a Mind Twist. So I get Mind Twist there, and the reason is opponents tap down. I can hit for 3. They've got 5 cards in hand. I can probably Mana Screw my opponent pretty hard. I do, actually. Fire Islet, Snow-Covered Island, Sorcerer's Spyglass, which, you know, obviously would be a bad play for them. And I've got him to follow up with it. Brutal, right? So now I'm not super worried about their commander, barring like a Lotus. Opponent draws and plays a land. It is not a Lotus, but does play a Mana Vault. Of course, Mana Vault is walking into the trap. So now the question is, do I hymn them and then Rack and Ruin? Do I Rack and Ruin first? Do I use K command? You know, what's the right way to sort of sequence this turn? I decide, and also, or do I just save to him because they only have 1 card in hand? If I Rack and Ruin here, they can draw, probably can't cast it, and then I can him and get 2 cards. So what is the correct route to take? And I decide that the correct route to take is this. And I'll explain it in a moment. You can see I'm pump faking because I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing here. So I'd go with him. So the reason I him, even though they only have 1 card in hand, is that I'm fairly confident that if I destroy these 2 artifacts, I win the game. And so my opponent also knows that I have Rack and Ruin, right? So I want him to make sure that the Rack and Ruin sticks, and I want it to hit now. But also, my opponent knowing I have the Rack and Ruin, of course they know I have the him, so they are in a bind where they can't hold it and they can't play it. That's what these 2 cards kind of do. But at any rate, the best thing I could think of my opponent doing here would be Factor Fiction and Response. And if they Factor Fiction and Response, then the him is not just going to get 1 card, it's going to get multiple cards. So this is perfect. It's going to drive the artifact removal through, and it's going to ensure that if they have a Factor Fiction, it is a very weak one, because, you know, at best I'm going to do a 3-2 split, and then the best thing they can do is they have to take the pile of 3, and then they only get to keep 1 card, and it's 1 card at random out of 3. And so with that in mind, I run the him out. I don't need max value, I just need to win the game, and this play wins the game, I'm pretty sure. So opponent draws, plays a land, and of course I have 5 mana. I play Rog, they know what's coming, they agree. This play did win the game, and we're done. Of course, if I wanted, I could take my opponent's draw phase away, you know, by K commanding whatever it is that they draw. But that would be absolutely stupid when I could play Tevesh Szat, draw some cards, and then see where to go from there. For a couple of reasons, one of which is just that it's stalling for almost no purpose whatsoever. Secondly, that would be somewhat stupid because my opponent could just draw the Delve spell. They could draw Dig Through Time, and if I K command my opponent and then they draw a Dig Through Time, they'll dig in response. Pick a card they don't care about and a card they do, and then throw away the card they don't care about, and then they're back in the game. So, yeah, much better to just get the commander out, pull way ahead, and win. And opponent sees that that's coming and agrees and scoops. All right, next game is against Giovanni CZ. And Giovanni CZ is playing an Offensive the Foremost deck, and I have a gross hand. And here we go, Gamble finally making its way into the deck. You can see the changes now. It's a full, I think it's a fully realized version. And if you look at this hand, if I gamble and I hit and I don't discard the gamble target, I win the game, right? So this card is 1 red, try to win the game right now. I mean, basically I win the game. So yeah, feeling pretty good about gamble, so I go ahead and just do that. All right, so we'll just do this and do this and do this. Oops. I'm so used to tutors being black that I tap for black there. And I discard the card I tutor for. Now, of course, I could have held the Grim Monolith and increased my chances of retaining it, but then it wouldn't have been as good of a target. And this is totally fine, right? If I go get the Mind Twist, I discard any of these cards. On my next turn, I play a land of Mind Twist, and the game's over. If not, that's fine. It's game on. The Mind Twist will be there. I'll get to it. No big deal. Yeah, so I just draw some cards, and I am a bit flooded, of course, but that's totally fine. Opponent gets a Bloom Tender out. I'm going to draw again, and, you know, drawing 4 cards per turn somehow does lend itself towards winning games. So go ahead and just plus for mana, play some more stuff, kill a thing, sit on a deflecting swat, pass for the turn, and opponent realizes that we are not playing the same game. My opponent's playing, you know, Magic, the Mana Gathering, and I'm playing something disgusting. I'm playing like Type 1 over here, and conceits. And yeah, I didn't. The Might Twist, it would have been great, but it didn't hurt me at all. And that's what's really interesting about Gamble, is that I think frequently it's like that. It's just I had a 75% chance to just win on the spot, and I missed my roll, but it's totally fine. All right, so I have to mulligan that first hand, playing against Act Solo, playing Maelstrom Wanderer, and I have a pretty good hand. I did mulligan, so I get rid of the mass creature removal, hoping that my opponent's not ramping with elves. They don't typically in a deck like that. All right, so we get an Opal into Chrome Mox, and then we get to run out the Torque, and then we get to Imperial Seal. So what do you get? Let's see if whatever you decided matches my choice. Opponent has a Mana Crypt, though, and a land in Tempt with Discovery. Of course, I can now search my library and go get a land, and then my opponent can then do it themselves, and it's a back and forth thing until someone stops. I am certainly not going to shuffle away the top card of my library to go get a basic land and give my opponent another one. So, done. And I tutored for Jessica's Will. Did not see the land Mana Crypt Tempt with Discovery turn coming. So this might actually be not as good as it could be, but it's still pretty solid. I got Will because I was thinking that my opponent had 6 cards, and more than likely I'd get the Will. Get a boatload of mana, get some extra cards, play the extra cards, make sure I hit my land drop, and still play my commander. Now it's a little more dicey, because if I play the Will and I don't hit mana, then I can't play my commander this turn. But it's as good as it's going to get. My opponent's tapped out. Let's do it. Alright, and just like that, no problems. We hit mana sources, so let's get some mana sources going. I'll get the Vista into play. And now I can just play my commander. I still can play City of Brass and Talisman, so I just need a way to play the Talisman. How about if we draw 3 cards and see what's there, and lo and behold, I get the Talisman too. Lovely. Good turns, good choices. That worked out all right. All right, so my opponent's at 5 mana with a Maelstrom Wanderer. Always a scary situation once they start getting going. And plays a Tatyova. Tatyova is going to allow my opponent to draw extra cards when lands enter the battlefield under their control and gain life. Luckily, it's not a fetch land, so they only get 1 card here. Gonna flip to Crypt, and I draw Skull Clamp. So gross. Like, probably one of the best cards in the whole deck because of who the commander is. Anyway, let's get going with the Clamp. We're going to see what I draw before investing mana into the obvious play. Sometimes the obvious play is not the correct play. There's a Karn. Karn would shut down Mana Crypt. That is a very good thing. So I decided that what I'm going to do here is play Karn. And then I've got exactly enough mana. I can play Karn and Liliana. Karn away the Crypt, just plus and kill it. It's off, but I don't want to give my opponent the chance of turning it back on. Minus to kill the Tatyova, and I still have a deflecting swap protecting my board. At this point, though, with Karn coming down, my opponent scoops it up. They're stuck on 4 mana with an 8 mana Planeswalker that sort of draws you extra cards, facing a 5 mana Planeswalker that draws you obscene amounts of cards. All right, next game is against Happy Meal Hero. And Happy Meal Hero ends up playing me 2 games. And the first one is playing Shattergang Brothers, and I've got my hand is Oh Brother, right? Okay, so my opponent mulligans, and sad to say, they mulligan to death, and I never get to play this hand out. It's like, come back, I want to kill you. Oh well. So, fortunately, they do come back, but, my hand doesn't look like first turn Tevesh Szat this time. It just looks super fair. right? Or do I mulligan and dig? It's hard to say. I decided that hand was too slow and too fair, and I decided to mulligan, and I mulliganed into this hand. This hand is fine. So I don't need Yogg-Will at this stage of the game. We'll get rid of that and play an expedition map and see what happens. Opponent leads off with land, exploration land, all basic too, which is interesting. I play Ancient Tomb and pass. Opponent then plays another land and uncontrolled infestation. So when this non-basic land becomes tapped, destroy it. So it's a delayed sinkhole. I get one more use out of it. It doesn't target my Ancient Tomb, which is really strange. I don't think they quite grasp the value of it. I guess they're looking at the fact it's costing me land. Life? Oh boy, I'm thinking it's bad. I'm not sure. But anyway, the reason I kept, of course, the hand the way that I did was because I knew I could go get, or more than likely, could go get Urborg, and then with Urborg get Necro down. Sad to see my land go, but it's done its job. And its job is drawing me cards. So we'll draw some extra cards, and then I play Rog. Because I don't know what my top cards are going to be, but if it's a free card, I want to be able to play it this turn, particularly if it's the deflection. And I actually do get a free card. I get Rollick, not the reflection, but that's cool because maybe, my opponent might have a Haste Dragon or, whatever. So, instead my opponent does not play their commander here. It's strange, and I cannot understand why they're leaving mana up. Anyway, for my turn, I'm going to play Badlands and hymn them and see if I can figure it out. And they discard Rancid Earth and Acidic Slime. Not able to play, not realizing they can cast Rancid Earth off of the Urborg, or not wanting to. I suspect not realizing. I think this opponent is probably new to the format, and they're just missing a lot of things. First of all, they're missing their duels. Secondly, they missed the fact, like, oh yeah, I can play my commander, And they missed the Urborg interaction that would have allowed them to Rancid Earth. So I feel a little bad, but I'm just going to do what the deck does anyway. Not bad enough not to do it, right? And we'll throw away City of Brass. I don't like cards that say tap, discard a card, which is what it effectively does with the Necro, unless I have to. All right, here my opponent does find a second green and then plays Tainted Aether. Really interesting card. I forgot this card existed, but it's actually pretty cool. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield, its controller sacrifices a creature or land. That's a really nice prison card. And does a really good job of hosing Tevesh Szat, right? Unless I want to sack a bunch of lands, I just make my guys and then sack them immediately. But I have Necro running, so... and of course I also have Feed the Swarm in my hand. So I'm just going to ignore it for now, play Tevesh Szat, I'm going to plus, and then I'm just going to sack the Thralls immediately. They just die. So not a super exciting turn. Alright, my opponent plays a Lava Claw Reaches. I'm not really sure what's going on over there. The only card I can think of that gets them in the game, once again, is Necro, and I don't want them to be competitive. And there's actually a way here where I can kill, because they played the Reaches, I can actually kill all of their black mana in one shot. So, let's do it. So I'm going to strip mine their Swamp, which seems pretty absurd with a Urborg in play, but I'm going to kill their Tainted Aether using 2 mana, make some dorks, play a Dust Bowl, Ritual, play a Dust Bowl activation, sacking my Urborg, and using it to kill their Lava Claw Reaches, which takes away all their black, and cast a Wishclaw Talisman, and then Necro for 4. And that is a pretty good turn. My opponent agrees, my opponent concedes. So, not a... obviously, like, my LD was just a little better than their LD. Because my LD was backed up by, Necro, obviously. And everything's better when it's backed up by Necro. Alright, so those are the 2 games against Happy Meal Hero. We have DH Sanchez, JK22, and Athadol, and then that's it. Alright, so DH Sanchez is playing Zada Hedron Grinder. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery, it targets this thing. Copy it for each creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets different ones. So, like, if they have a bunch of tokens and stuff, they play this, and they play a card that says, target creature gains haste, draw a card. They would just draw, like, right? Pretty cool. Not cEDH, certainly not this, but cool. Anyway, I'm even going first. Like, this is just So gross, right? So command tower, Mox Amber, play Rograkh, use Rograkh to make red, play Springleaf Drum, use Springleaf Drum to make black, and him to Torok my opponent on turn 1. Missing lands, but I did get Accelerate, which is a target and draw a card, and I got a card that says as additional cost, sack an artifact to make 3/1/1. So the exact combo, the exact kind of thing my opponent's deck wants to do, and 2 of those cards are out of their hand. Opponent, for their part, strip mines me. So interesting choice. I mean, I have 2 more mana in play, but strip mines me, so I shouldn't be able to play my commander here. Unfortunately for my opponent, so I can just Vampiric, draw my Black Lotus for all intents and purposes, and then use it to cast Tidings. And put Rograkh back in the command zone. Well, I would, except at this point in the game, I have 4 cards in hand, a Tevesh Szat, 3 mana, my opponent has 5 cards in hand, literally nothing, and concedes, which makes sense. Alright, JK22. So like I said, this deck's running 5 Moxes, a Soul Ring, and a Lotus. Everybody else, most other players are not. And so it's kind of weird, this format. If they don't do something about the fast mana in the format, if they don't do something about the Jeweled Lotus and these other cards that are so abusive, partners and stuff, in my view, a fix for the format would be make it broken for everyone. So if you, for example, made a new rule that said in Commander you're allowed to have, say, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 proxies, like you're allowed to just proxy, say, 10 cards, and then just unban Black Lotus and the 5 Moxes, along with a couple of other cards, maybe not, I don't know, maybe just those. But if you did that, then everyone would get to do ridiculous, stupid things. And what would be interesting is I believe the way it would work is that Rog could run, how does this, let me double check here. So I'm checking something really quick, and then we'll play these last couple games. I just want to check myself before I wreck myself on this. Let's bring this in. Yeah. So you see I can't bring in the Talisman because it's outside the commander's color identity. So what would actually happen is I'd get a Lotus, I'd get a black and a red Mox. And that's it. 5 color decks, though, would get 5 Moxes. And 5 color decks currently suck because 5 color decks have a commander that can't take advantage of Jeweled Lotus. So even if you didn't allow Black Lotus, even if you just allowed the 5 Moxes, it would actually, I would get +2 Moxes, but they would get +5. And it would actually restore balance to the force, essentially. It would actually balance out how unfair the format is. Unfortunately, it would be doing it by creating other problems potentially, but I think it'd be a lot more interesting than the way the format is now. I mean, it's clear to me that something's wrong with the format, right? It's pretty busted, and I could probably get into it a little further, but bottom line is, rather than talking about it and I guess pissing into the wind, it makes more sense to do something about it, and that is to play the cards, play the broken cards, and just show how messed up this format is right now. Anyway, I'm playing against Kaikar, and look at this. I have Mox, exactly what I was saying before. I get 5 Moxes to my opponents, like maybe they have 1 or 2. It's just so dumb. Anyway, opponent leads off with, whatever. Doesn't matter. I try calling the weak too. So basically a Black Lotus, because with Rograkh, this thing is essentially 0 sack add 3 black would be the same as 1 sack add 4 black. So yeah, I can now, if you just notice, I can play Mox Amber, Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox, and bring Imperial Seal. I can sack the, tap the Mox Amber for red, tap the Diamond for red, so that's 2 red, tap the Chrome Mox for black off the Imperial Seal, tap the Swamp for black, and play the Calling the Weak. And that would produce 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. With 4 of it, I can put it in a Chandra, which would leave me with 3. I can then Chandra to add 2 red and cast Tevesh Szat. So on turn 1, I get to play 4 permanent sources of mana, and Chandra and Tevesh Szat. Seems pretty good. But before that happens, my opponent is like, yes, I'm out. And of course, I don't blame them. would have been really fun though to Chandra into Tevesh Szat on turn 1. But hey, you know, it is what it is. And what it is broken. All right, Al Thadal is my final opponent for the day, so we'll see how this runs out. Maybe it will be just as exciting as the last. Maybe it won't. Opponent's playing Kess, and they get to go first. I've got a very mediocre hand here, but it does have fast mana, so, you know, fast temporary mana. And it has Saga, which is really good. And it has a way to, like, get back in the game if my opponent starts pulling too far ahead. So with all that in mind, plus, you know, Chandra can kill Kess potentially if I can stick it. So with all that in mind, I decide I'll keep. It's very risky, and my opponent leads off with tapped Xander's Lounge, so I'm happy to see that. I draw nothing too exciting here, but I do see get my Urza Saga down. It's a slight risk, you know. Again, they could play like land and then kill the Saga if they have the black card that kills enchantments, or they could, you know, just strip mine it or whatever. But hey, I want to get it running, and the sooner I can get access to Soul Ring, the better. Especially when your opponent has Mana Crypt. Oh crap! Now the game's getting scary, right? Mana Crypt, Volcanic Island. They're one mana away from Kess. What is this going to be? Stinkweed Imp. That's not how you build Kess, my friend. All right. Well, I understand why it's in there, but it's not a good choice. I'm quite relieved to see it. And yeah, so I play this way. So for the turn, I'm going to run out Shatter Skull and smashing, and use it to be smashing the Crypt. Hopefully. We'll see if it gets countered. It does not. Okay, so good. I bought some time. Kess has not killed me yet. I get to delay a bit. So maybe, I assume, though, this means that the opponent's Reanimator. I just don't think you ever hardcast Stinkweed Imp. I just don't think that that's possibly correct. Anyway, I'm going to float. Definitely no chance of making a robot here anyway. And fetch into, of course, Soul Ring. And with Soul Ring and some mana, I'm not even going to try to run into possible mana drain here and just lose the game. I'm going to just play Dust Bowl and aggressively attack my opponent's mana. I've got tons of mana in my hand. Let's go for it. 3 colors destroyed. I'll trade 1 color for 3. What do you think about that? Opponent has no response, thankfully. Alright, so I get hit again and actually has no more mana. Excellent. Well, Graven Cairns is hard to use when you're sacking land, so let's just sack that and kill my opponent's mana again. Opponent actually makes a comment at this point, I believe. We'll see. And says, how is LDCEDH? It's just slow. And I said, if you've lost, that would be the answer to your question. If you haven't, then perhaps you have a point. Let's just see which is the case. All right. So anyway, for my turn, I play a Swamp Coalition Relic and a Grim Monolith and pass. I'm fine. I've got Gamble, but I don't need. There's no rush. And I can Tevesh plenty of cards in my hand and almost guarantee a hit on Gamble. And unless there's a reason to hurry here, I'm perfectly fine, perfectly content to just take my time. Alright, so I'm thinking about it. What's the best way to do this? I decide here I will run the Gamble out now. And in response, my opponent just concedes. I figured here I'm going to run the Gamble out because none of the cards in my hand are particularly, none of the cards in my hand matter too much if I don't get to keep them. And, of course, you should know what I'm going to get here. It's the same card I gambled for last time. I'm going to go get Mind Twist. This gives me a 80% chance to win the game on the spot. My opponent doesn't have a commander out, so I don't have to worry about deflecting SWAT. And so, yeah, I'm just going to go get Mind Twist. And I don't know if I would have actually, kept it or not, but looks pretty good. If I go get Mind Twist here and I hit, I discard anything that isn't Mind Twist. I twist my opponent for 6. Game ends. If I go get Mind Twist here and I lose the Mind Twist, no problem. Just play Tevesh Szat, play Rog, start drawing cards, rock on with the rest of the game, right? So, again, 1 red, 80% chance to win the game. Seems like a card worth playing, and of course, in this case, my opponent says, well, it's a lock on board. I couldn't play another land if I wanted and keep it. It's no better than a counter deck. Even at cEDH level, it's not worth playing against, he says. I don't fully understand what that means because cEDH means competitive EDH, so I'm not tracking what the complaint is. I think they're just feeling unhappy because, you know, Dust Bowl has locked him out of the game. And that I do understand. It is the reason that we're running Dust Bowl, though. Because sometimes it just does that. Like, sometimes the card is just like, you know, I don't have a Crucible, but I'm perfectly happy just keeping you out of this game with a single card. And that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed those games. It was a long video, lots of changes. And as always, I look forward to your thoughts on this. You didn't get to see some of the tech. Unfortunately, it was a different day when I added the Batterskull and had an excellent game where Batterskull was fantastic. Ryan's been playing around with it as well as some of the other folks running the deck. And Batterskull's been excellent for us, believe it or not. So you'll have to try it for yourself to see. But I believe it has a role to play. An alternate card, if you wanted to draw, if you wanted to try it though, and you just absolutely hate the Batterskull in this deck, you could run the 6 mana Sorin that can drain life for 2 a couple times, and then Mindslaver your opponent. It is 6 mana, so it's a little bit more painful if you flip it to Dark Confidant or Ad Nauseam, but still, generally speaking, if one of those cards is active, you've probably won the game anyway. And of course, it can quickly end a game too, because it can just drop your opponent to 10 and then bang, 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 bang. So that is another route you could take, but at 3 black versus a 5 casting cost card that I can play off of a workshop, and 2 damage only versus a card that can potentially deal 4. I feel like Batterskull's a little bit better, but if you want to make that swap, that is another card I considered. You could certainly do that. Alternately, someone had suggested Steel Hellkite as a possible way to kill Planeswalkers, and that certainly makes sense as well. You could potentially put Steel Hellkite in the slot. There's a number of things you could do. You could get real crazy with it and run like Mirror Universe. But again, I think that Life Gain and all the things that Batterskull does is what we want, or it wouldn't be here. But let me know what you think. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.